All right, I am going to introduce you to our speaker, Kristin. I am putting her in the spotlight right now. Sorry, Kristin. Did it go? Didn't go. Let me unshare for a minute. Share. Nope. Well, this is lovely. Talk about like the share. No. See, nobody is good at this, especially me. Here we go. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. So Kristin Dailey is somebody that I've known for a while, and I think some of you know her. She was formerly the educational director at the Down Syndrome Association of Northeast Ohio, which used to be called the Upside of Downs. She was with them or us for a very long time. She has a brother, Matthew, that she's been advocate for and caretaker for most of his life, I imagine, right, Kristin? When Matthew got done with high school, he and Kristin went around to speak and present in lots of different venues about how to be with people with Down syndrome and how to be kind and show compassion and what Down syndrome is about, and to show the wonderful side of Matthew. So that's what they did then. She has started a podcast, which I mentioned briefly to you. The first episode was on December 2nd, and it's just, I watched it. It's so amazing. And it speaks to us. It speaks to our loved ones, whether they're siblings or whether they're, our children. And she's in it with a few other people who are also well-versed in this community on the topics of our loved ones that are aging. So, Kristin, I think I touched on everything that you and I spoke about, so feel free to start when you're ready.
Okay. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay, and if at any point you need me to speak up, just let me know. It is a gift and an honor to be here. I'm really overcome with a lot of emotions right now. I have my beautiful brother. I don't know if this is Matthew is a picture of us. So he's sitting on the desk right here watching over. There are a lot of people I recognize on here. It's great to see some of you again. Mary Beth, and Chris, and Neil, to name a few. And then a lot of people that are new to me. So it's great to meet you. And I want to thank you for making the time to be here tonight and to listen to my story. I have a couple of goals. I am going to be following along with some notes just to keep me on track so that I can stay in alignment with our time frame here. I'm going to share some educational information on Down syndrome and Alzheimer's, and I'm going to share my family story and journey. My brother lived a life of connection, and he always brought people together. So I want to carry on that legacy, and tonight I hope to connect with each of you on some level in some way, and I hope that something that I say will resonate with you. I'm also going to share my email and my phone number at the end of this, and please feel free to keep the connections going, the conversations going. Reach out to me at any point, email me, text me, and just know that I'm here to have contact.
It's the light.
Tonight I want a safe space for all of us, so feel free to wear your heart on your sleeve. My emotions are probably going to range from being a speaker to being a sister. I might cry, I might not cry. I never know when the grief and the emotions are going to come over me. So it's intended to be a safe space for all of us tonight. I do want you to know that there are some things that I'm going to talk about that might be difficult for you to hear. If at any point you're uncomfortable or it's too hard for you as I get to the end of my brother's journey, I won't be offended if you hop off, if you don't want to be a part of it. So just know that I understand and realize that. Also, I'm going to be sharing from a sibling perspective. being mindful that we all have different roles, we all come from different walks of life, circumstances, resources, and I'm very aware of that. And I realize we're all in different places with the journey. Maybe you have a loved one in their 20s or 30s and you came here to get some information out and learn. Maybe you're in the middle of it. Maybe you are at the point of the journey where your loved one has passed on. So please know that wherever you are, my heart is with you, and that I am going to try to speak to the range of where everyone is in this journey. So with those few little housekeeping notes, let's dive briefly into the educational piece of this. And some of this may be repeat for you, some of you, or also I'm half Italian, so I talk with my hands a lot. So be prepared for that. Later, I'm going to share about my podcast, and there's a great episode where you can learn more about this educational piece and you can do a deep dive into it. So I'm going to try to just cover the high level stuff. What blows my mind is that research has shown that the overall lifetime risk of our loved ones aging with Down syndrome and developing Alzheimer's is over 90%. And that risk increases every decade over 40 years of life. So I think the most recent statistic that I saw was 95%. And why does this happen? Because research has proven that the 21st chromosome plays a key role in the development of Alzheimer's in the Down syndrome population because it carries the gene that makes the protein, which is responsible for changes in the brain caused by Alzheimer's, and we've been able to see these plaque buildups in scans. So it's important to note that we might not always see the cognitive changes in our loved ones with Down syndrome, but we do know that these plaques exist. And we've also learned that the genes exist on the 21st chromosome that play a role in the aging process, which is why it's common to see premature aging in our loved ones. I do want to take a side note here and let you know that I had the honor and the privilege a couple of months ago to actually go to the University of Irvine, California, and to see they're doing a brain study, and they are brains that are donated of family members that have with Down syndrome that have died, and it was a very emotional and very difficult thing for me to see, but also a privilege because I was able to see firsthand the brain of individuals with Alzheimer's and Down syndrome compared to someone of the typical population. And everything that we talk about in the research and the plaques and the buildups and even the size of the brain, I was able to see firsthand, and it just really validates how important the research is that we're doing and how much we need our loved ones with Alzheimer's to participate in these studies. So it was very eye-opening to me, but it's a real thing. And I can share more about that later if anyone is interested in that. But that would be offline for sure. So getting back to more of what I was saying. So Alzheimer's disease it's a clinical diagnosis, and it's diagnosis by exclusion, meaning we need to rule out any other possible health issues. And we go by the clinical symptoms of our loved ones, which is why it's so important to have a good baseline, a good doctor who is familiar with the population, and to trust your gut. And this part is really important. If you get to the point where you're just saying, Matthew is just not Matthew lately, he just doesn't seem like himself, or, Jenny isn't just like Jenny, trust your gut, because that could be a sign that you need to start looking at some things. There's a wonderful tool that's been put out by the NTG, which is the National Task Force Group, and some of you may be familiar with it, and it's the EDSD. It's a screening. I think it's early. I always get this mixed up. Early detection screening for dementia. This is being used. They were recommending using it in the 40s. But now they're saying when your loved one's even in their 30s, this is a great tool to use. It's a great way to get baseline information, kind of goes through a whole checklist, and it will come in handy down the road. So I would recommend looking that up if you're not familiar with it, if it's something that you feel like you could use. Typically, we don't see onset until mid to late 40s and even early 50s, which is why it's so important to rule out other possible causes of changes in behavior. Some of these changes, which I'll just touch on briefly, and again, I encourage you to go to the podcast and listen to our common aging issues episode. But some of the problems could be the health issues, thyroid issues, sleep apnea, vitamin deficiencies, especially vitamin B12 is one, autoimmune disorders, UTIs, urinary tract infections. And you may also see some psychological issues that can be addressed by a good doctor. As a side note, we used a psychiatrist in Cleveland, Dr. Stephen Rudrick. Some of you may be familiar with him. And he was Matthew's psychiatrist for years because we did see a lot of these changes in Matthew's behaviors that needed to be addressed. Um, because it's important to realize that sometimes in their 30s and 40s, there are a lot of life changes going on. Siblings are moving out, they're getting married, parents are dealing with their own aging issues, close ones, family members are beginning to die. So there's a lot of trauma that our loved ones can be dealing with that could cause some of these psychological issues. Matthew did experience some of these, and we did have to address things like hallucinating, depression. He was hearing voices. He had some emotional outbursts. So very important to rule these things out before you come to a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And again, that's a clinical diagnosis from a doctor who is well-versed in dealing with our population with intellectual disabilities. Once you've ruled any of those other health issues out, some of the common things you may see, signs of Alzheimer's, aging, are behavior changes that are unusual for them. And this is why it's important to know their baseline, and for people that work with them on a daily basis, whether they live with you or they don't, for them to understand and know their baseline. Heightened anxiety and frustration, sleep patterns. One of the things we noticed with Matthew was my mom would go in he lived at home all his life. My mom would go into the bedroom in the morning and he would have 6 or 7 shirts all over the floor. He was getting up multiple times during the night to change. He was losing concept of time. He would show up in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, getting ready to go to his day program, confused about the time of day. He would not he would put his jeans on, but not his underwear, or one sock would be on, one sock would be off. So just little patterns that were unusual for him. And I'll reference Matt just kind of generally now, but I'm going to get into the weeds of it when I tell his story. Later on, as the disease was progressing, and again, these are things important to know about. If you want more information, we can connect again. Depth perception problems, understanding, thresholds and doorways can be a big thing, going up and down stairs, fear of going up and down stairs, gait changes, the way that they walk. Our loved ones continue to have, because of the premature aging, arthritis is very common. Cervical arthritis is very common, cervical spine. And hips, because of their, increased flexibility. We learned that Matthew basically had bone on bone hip joints, not until it was too late. But, these are just things to be aware of. And fine motor skills began to change for him, mood changes. Matthew was always a very good writer, and we would notice, and he could spell and read, and he started saying things, how do you spell today? How do you spell, this word? And then in his writing, he would continue to trace over the same letter or the same words, and he wasn't able to write complete sentences anymore. So I know that has been kind of a common thread from other siblings that I've talked to with that writing piece. So be sure to take good notes, to take videos, record behaviors. We used a lot of cell phone recordings to show our doctors that we were dealing with, to say, this is, what he's doing, this is what the behavior looks like. And most importantly, to choose a really good doctor and try to work with a doctor that really has an understanding of Down syndrome and Alzheimer's. And there are some really good resources out there. If you don't have a doctor that specializes in this is something else we should put a link to. Dr. Brian Chicoine in Chicago and a group of doctors just came out with a program called Care Down Syndrome, and it's meant to really bridge that gap between doctors and families and act as a resource for doctors and for families, especially if they're unfamiliar with Down syndrome and Alzheimer's. So if you want more information on that, please reach out to me because that's an excellent resource to use. So I hope I didn't go too fast over that part of it, but I really want to take time to share our story. So the big reason why am I here? Why am I here tonight? I'm here to connect and carry on the legacy of love, commitment, and the don't give up, make a difference attitude that Matthew gave to everyone he encountered. My life changed on October 10th, 2023, when Matthew died. And I know for a fact he went to heaven. He was my angel on earth. And I felt so empty, without purpose, and like a piece of my heart had been ripped out, and my world was turned upside down. Because I'm a very spiritual person, I trusted that God would walk through the storm with me and that he had a purpose and a direction for my life and for learning how to help me live with my new lifelong companion named grief. And this past summer, I became a certified grief counselor. And most recently, two friends and I from Down Syndrome Facebook support group launched the Aging with Down Syndrome podcast, which we'll continue to talk about a little bit later. So I'm continuing to find meaning and purpose since Matthew's death, and I really want to be able to offer any help, encouragement, and support for people in this journey, because I know it can feel lonesome. I know you can feel like it's challenging and you don't know where to turn, and it's hard to find other people that have gone through the journey. So my hope is to be able to continue Matthew's legacy of love, connection, and commitment to helping others. So let's focus on Matt for a little bit. I'll try to paint a clear picture on his life in a short amount of time so we can have time for questions and answers and a conversation. But I just want you to get an idea of Matthew's life. Matthew was the oldest of three. He was born in 1971. My brother Steve followed in 1975, and then I was the baby and only girl in 1976. My parents were very young. They were 21 and 23. And I think many of you that are on here that had babies in the 60s and 70s can relate to probably the typical story of what happened in the hospital, right? So Matthew was born at the time. They said you have a baby with mongoloidism. He's not going to walk. He's not going to talk. He's not going to do all of these things. And he probably won't live very long. So we recommend that you put him in an institution. And of course, my parents being 21 and 23, not knowing what to do, not ever hearing of this, we're thinking, should we do this? What's the right path for him? We don't know anything about Down syndrome until an angel of a nurse came in and sat down and talked with them and told them, you take this baby home and you raise him like you would any other child. You love him and you give him the life that you would give any other child. So they did. So they took him home to a very large, loving, supportive family who embraced him and loved him and supported my parents. And they were fortunate enough to start early intervention programs with Matthew. And then at age 5, my family moved to Nairobi, Kenya, where I was born, actually a month after we moved there. So Matthew attended a non-traditional school in Kenya. He was in a school that was run by the Peace Corps. He learned to read and write. He was in school with Kenyans. He was in school with people, that had families if there were expats over there. He spoke Swahili. He participated in Special Olympics, and he really, really thrived. My mom said that those 5 years were the best 5 years of his education. Fast forward, we come back to the States in 1983, and Matthew continued in resource room settings throughout the rest of his school career. We lived in Solon, so Matthew went to all Solon schools, although at the time they were in a consortium and he went to some of the other ones. But in high school, that Matthew and I began our brother-sister team speaking endeavor. And we went around to all of the freshman gym classes, and I basically told my story. Oh, here's what it's like to have a brother with Down syndrome. And Matthew would say, this is what it's like to have Down syndrome. We're more alike than we're different. And I like probably a lot of the things that you like. And so this gig ended up lasting for probably another 20 to 25 years beyond college. Then we took it out into schools around Ohio. We presented at conferences in different states. We presented to a lot of professionals. Fourth grade on up was really our target audience. So we had a lot of time together, and we really cherished those moments, being able to talk to kids, and all the letters that we received over the years. I still look back at some of them now just to see what difference Matthew made. I mean, he was always the star speaker. So now we're into Matt's early 30s, and we began noticing some behavioral changes, emotional outbursts. This is what I was saying before, hallucinations, mood swings. And at the time, we were told, well, he probably has early onset Alzheimer's. But we later learned that that was an incorrect diagnosis. We were just dealing with some typical and probably some regression. And we addressed all of those. And with medication and other avenues, just maybe, I can't even remember, I think maybe some counseling, we were able to address those and deal with those. But later in his mid 40s, we began to notice more symptoms of the Alzheimer's. And this is where our story really gets kind of into the meat of it. When Matt was 48 in February of 2020, we went to Dr. Carl Tyler, who's with the Cleveland Clinic. Some of you may be familiar with him. He specializes in dealing with and working with adults with Down syndrome and Alzheimer's. And Dr. Tyler asked us if Matthew has begun to have any seizures yet, because we were seeing a lot of changes and we thought maybe the decline was happening faster. And we were all taken aback. I was with my mom and dad, and we kind of looked at Dr. Tyler and said, what do you mean? Is he having any seizures yet? And he said, well, number one, it tells me that we have a correct diagnosis of Alzheimer's, because typically that goes hand in hand with Alzheimer's and Down syndrome. And again, this goes back to the amount of plaques that are in the brain and the progression of the Alzheimer's. And the second thing is, he said it tells us that the disease is progressing, and he's further into the disease now that he's having seizures. So at that point, we had no experience with that. Almost 2 weeks to the day from that appointment, Matt had his first grand mal seizure. That landed him in the hospital for 3 weeks. He had fever of unknown origin. They put him through all kinds of testing, which I would go back and recommend you don't do if you know what your diagnosis is of Alzheimer's. There's little things that it's important to know. We can hit on at another time, just things like anytime you give anesthesia to a person with Down syndrome who's aging or has Alzheimer's, that's a really big risk to take. They may not really ever come out of that fog from the anesthesia. That's something important to know and talk to your doctor about. I would ask your doctor, what's the desired outcome for the reason for putting them under for something, if it's not going to change the path of what you do. But that was just a little side note. So 3 weeks in the hospital, then 3 weeks into rehab, and then COVID hit. So 2020, we're March of 2020, COVID hit, and we were in a rehab facility, and we were told, you can leave Matthew in here. You're no longer allowed to come and see him. The one exception we'll make is that one of his parents can move in the facility here with him, but the other one won't have access to him. Or you can just take him home or put him in an assisted living facility. So leaving him there was absolutely not an option. We talked about our other options. We looked into assisted living. Because we did not know what his needs would be. I also want to note that before the seizure, Matthew was able to walk. He was ambulatory. He was having issues with his gait and, some joint issues. He was still talking. He was completely able to use the bathroom on his own, although he was showing some signs of incontinence. And we thought that the progression with the Alzheimer's was going to kind of go, okay, first he'll maybe become incontinent, then maybe he won't be able to walk, then maybe, we'll have trouble with this. But when Matthew had the seizure, for him, everything changed overnight. He became incontinent. He lost 90% of his speech. He was not able to walk. He was non-ambulatory. He couldn't walk anymore. So all of those things for us happened overnight. And again, I realize every story is different and every journey is different, but this was what happened in our situation. So when we were making the decision on what to do, we were offered home hospice as an option because at that point, the doctor pretty much felt that he had 6 months or less to live based on the lack of progress that he was making in the facility, based on the fact that he had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And we decided to go that route because it worked best for our family. I could have a whole nother conversation with you on hospice and why we loved it and why it worked for us, and also why it's not just a final end of life, final months or final weeks or final days type of thing. We were in hospice for 3.5 years with Matthew. And we didn't know that was going to be the case. So we rallied the troops. We brought him home. We were very fortunate to be able to hire 24/7 live-in care. At the time with COVID, even though he had an IO waiver and we could get supports in the home, it was hard to find caregivers. It was hard to find consistency of caregivers. That was very important to us to be able to have the same caregiver round the clock. And we really felt that Matthew would thrive the best in our home. And we were fortunate that we were able to do that. We began the next stage of our journey. We turned my parents' dining room into a bedroom. Hospice delivered a hospital bed. He had a big Broda wheelchair. He had a Hoyer lift. All the supplies came. And here we were, not knowing what to do. It was almost like bringing a newborn home from the hospital because Matthew's coming home. We have a stranger living in our house. We are being told that he has 6 months or less to live. We don't know how to work this equipment. So it was a very overwhelming process, as you can imagine. And I'm going to pause here for a few minutes just to do a little grief education because it's an important part of the journey. And I think many of you will be able to relate to what I'm about to say. So in our journey, where we are in our story, we're now in what we call the anticipatory grief stage. And many of you may be in this stage right now too. You're feeling the loss of a loved one. You know that they're going to die, and this is a disease that is terminal. You're beginning to grieve a future without them. You're dreading that future. You're losing them little by little. And this stage can last for days or months or years. And in our case, it turned out to be 3.5 years. So now you have to attend to your grief and you have to still be present with what's going on in your life and be able to care for your loved one. And this can feel very overwhelming. And my advice would be in this stage to control what you can and allow yourself to grieve what you can't. And I'll tell you this, when you fight reality, reality always wins. So it's important to find ways to stay present and be able to be in the moment. And I'll get into some caregiver tips later and ways that you can do this shortly. But I say this because it's important to recognize this and even educate yourself about this. We can do a whole nother session on grief one day if anybody ever wants to. But back to Matthew. So we continue our journey with home hospice in our house multiple times per week. We were very lucky that the hospice agency that was working with our family really had consistency. I think we only had 2 staff members that turned over during that 3.5 years. Our hospice doctor actually had a background in working with individuals with intellectual disabilities. That was a huge plus for us. So she was very aware of medications and what would maybe work with people with Down syndrome versus not. She was very aware of the aging process. So we were very, very blessed with the team that we had. I was there with my parents almost every single day. My other brother was there as much as he could, and we really had an army of other family and friends. And when I look back, this was such a gift and such a blessing. Just an example of the way that Matthew always brought people together and always connected people, but to see that the love, or well, the love was palpable. You could see it, you could feel it, we experienced it. And it was so important to us. That what Matthew's life was about, being around other people. He loved time with family. He loved all of his cousins. He loved his friends. He loved his parents. He loved his nieces and nephews. So as much as we could, we just surrounded Matthew with love. And I really believe that that helped him live as long as he did once we brought him home with that 6-month diagnosis. So it's hard to cherish that time and not get caught up in it. But if you can, just savor these moments and enjoy this time. And if your loved one is not overwhelmed by people being around, I mean, we did have to pay attention to that, especially as the disease progressed. You know, noises would overstimulate him, but continue to keep surrounding them with love as much as you can. It's important to note that Alzheimer's and Down syndrome is not linear. And here's what I mean. So things will be status quo for a while. And even though Matthew, and again, this is what happened in our situation. I know people's loved ones decline much faster, and that can be for a number of reasons. Their age could factor into it, coexisting health conditions could factor into it. If they get an illness or infection, that could factor into it. So I'm just telling you this in our situation, what happened. But this is typical in people with Down syndrome and Alzheimer's, that this isn't a linear disease. People will go status quo, and then an event occurs. For example, a few months after Matthew came home, he was doing very well. Then he had another seizure. So he was here, and then he took a step down, and he never really got back up to here where he was for a while. And then he had another seizure. We were lucky that he only ever had 3 seizures during the course of his time at home. Then we kind of went to here. Then he got COVID, and yes, he was vaccinated, but he got COVID twice during that time. Then he took a step down here, never really got back up to here. Then somewhere down the road, he ended up with pneumonia or cold or respiratory infection, kind of went down a little bit more. So for us, it was a very great, you take a few steps down, you go, kind of like plateau out for a little bit, a few steps down, plateau out for a little bit. So it was a slow decline in our situation. And I do attribute some of this to the fact that we had multiple caregivers. Matthew had no health issues. His skincare was impeccable and immaculate. He never developed any kind of bed sore that led to an infection. We were very careful about the way we fed him and knowing when to transition his foods to go from regular eating to mechanical diet to puree diet so that it would be safe for him to continue to eat as long as he could. And his age, I mean, he was 48, 49, 50, 51, so he was still relatively young. In the last years of Matthew's life, more and more changes were obvious in the decline. And Matthew went through every stage of the disease. Not everybody goes through all of the stages. And a lot of the reasons for that are because they get an infection and they pass away from complications from the infection, or they develop a bed sore, they get pneumonia. It's usually a complication from Alzheimer's. They choked and then they ended up, aspirating, and they developed aspiration pneumonia from a choking incident. So we were blessed that Matthew went through every stage, except I will say the one that we didn't hit was he never forgot who we were. There were times and days where I know he didn't know who we were, but right up until the very end, I know that he knew who we were. And we felt that, and I would put money on it that he did not forget who we were. So going through every single stage for us was a blessing, but it was also the hardest, most gut-wrenching, heartbreaking thing to witness. And and this is where I'll start to get emotional because the last stage is losing the ability to swallow and to eat. And to watch someone not be able to do that and to see them choking and coughing on their saliva is very hard to witness and to have to watch. Um, we also noticed that we knew we were it kind of in the end, well, we knew we were in the end stages because he was sleeping a lot. And, we learned to let him tell us where he was. And he was telling us, I need to rest and my body needs to save this energy to do the things that it needs to do just to get through the day. Um, he would be a little more zoned out. The myoclonic jerking, if you're not familiar with that, they're not harmful seizures, but their bodies start to have more myoclonic jerking episodes. He was losing more and more speech, and he was having more coughing, eating episodes. So, I don't want to get into all the details about that now, but I would love to share at some point, or if somebody specifically wants to know about this, things that are just really important to know about that with the eating and the swallowing and how you can make it more safe for them to be able to eat longer. But we can have that conversation offline. Then we were at the point where the hospice doctor she was starting to take Matthew off some of his medications that he was on because the risk of keeping him on the medication or the side effects were worse than just taking him off the medications completely. So there were not as many benefits from keeping him on the medication. And then finally, the day came where the doctor said, it's no longer safe to feed him. I mean, Matthew always had that people-pleasing mentality. He always wanted to try. Matthew didn't get to the point where he refused food. He would basically, what happened, the way he refused food was he would sleep 20, 22 hours a day, and there was really no opportunity for him to eat. And when he was awake, he would try. He really would try, but then he would have some coughing episodes and choking episodes. And that was very, very difficult for my mom and my dad to have to wrap their mind around this, because you feel like I'm starving my child, I'm going to contribute to the decline and ultimately his death. And that was a whole nother area that we had to address and work with. And then it was when the doctor said to my mom, if we allow Matthew to continue to eat, he could have a choking episode. And in the middle of that, his heart could stop beating. And that's how he would go. And is that what you want to remember, your last memory? I mean, she was very blunt with us, but that really helped us say, okay, we have to stop feeding him anymore. There's a whole nother piece to that. When the body is dying, when the body is shutting down, it doesn't want food. It doesn't need food. It doesn't need hydration. You can do more harm by trying to give fluids, or some people want to consider a feeding tube or give IV liquids to them. And you could actually flood their lungs and drown them. I mean, I know this sounds very harsh, but there's so many important things to know and to try to learn about what happens when the body is shutting down so that you can understand the process of what's going on. So, once we were told that it was no longer safe to feed Matthew, we figured it would be just a matter of days. And Matthew, in true Matthew spirit, lived another 12 days without food or without drink. And the doctor said he's living on his spirit. She didn't have a medical explanation for it. Our hospice team, again, was a godsend. They helped us understand everything. They're there for the entire family, not just the patient. Um, and I do believe that Matthew lived for another 12 days because he was a fighter and he knew my parents were not ready for this. My mom and dad accepted the diagnosis and what it meant at different times in the journey. That is a whole nother road to navigate, the acceptance of it. And as gut-wrenching as this was, to every day for 12 days wonder, is this going to be the day? Is this going to be the day? It was one of the most beautiful and selfless gifts of unconditional love that Matthew has given to our family. He knew what he was doing. He was orchestrating this whole event. My kids moved into my mom and dad's house. My brother, my nephew, my cousin, our dog. We moved in for 7 days, the last 7 days, all of us together. I was there for a while before that. And we shared so many beautiful moments together. We laughed, we cried, we all had individual time at Matthew's bedside. We played music, we shared stories. You know, I would walk into his room and two of my kids would be there laying with him. My parents could be with him. You know, this is the time you just want to tell him everything. So it was such a gift to see so many friends and family come in and out of my parents' home. It was a place of love. It was a place of laughter. It was a place of crying and sharing. And it was really what we needed to get through these last days. So I think about that and I just say, this is Matthew. This is his unconditional love. Of course he would do that. Of course he would connect us. Once again, that word connection and bring us all together like this. His final days were very difficult. They consisted of round-the-clock medication. We opted not to give Matthew morphine in the end, but there are other alternatives. And we wanted to keep him comfortable. But it was very, you know, you don't see this stuff in the movies, and death isn't as beautiful and peaceful as it looks in the movies. But, you know, because we got to this point in our journey, we were having to give him round the clock medication. We had to suction him every couple hours. We had to clean him. We had to position him and turn him. And again, we made this choice. We could have put him in the in the hospice facility, and they would do that for us. But we made this choice as a family that we wanted to do this, and we had the help and the support. And again, I can get into more of these details if anybody wants to know specifics. And I don't want to try to make this all grim and sad for you, but I do want to, in the spirit of making this a raw and honest conversation, I do want to share these things with you. In his final hours, we all took turns at his bedside. It was the love was palpable, and for his last breaths, my mom, my dad, and my brother and I were around his bedside. All of the other kids and everybody else were in another room. And I think this is how Matthew wanted it. And typically when someone is dying, they will determine the way they want to die. I used to be a hospice volunteer, and I've witnessed a lot of different scenarios like this. So, you know, you could sit vigil for 24/7 and you get up and leave to go to the bathroom for a minute, and that's when they choose to die because they don't want you to see it, or they want everyone at their bedside. So I believe Matthew chose the way that he was going to leave this earth. And it was, you know, you hear the death rattle, you hear the sound, but to know, again, to understand and know that we knew he wasn't in pain. We knew that he didn't suffer. and we were all able to be with him. Knowing that Matthew was not suffering or in pain, knowing he was surrounded by his family, and because we're spiritual people and ready to meet Jesus, gave us comfort and peace in the most heartbreaking time of our lives. And that is kind of the short version. I could talk for hours and hours and hours, but that is the short version of, Matthew's birth to Matthew's death. And we have learned so much from it, and we have learned so much from Matthew himself as a person. And then going through the journey, there are things that I would recommend everyone do. There's things I would say, just so you don't have to go through this experience. Here's what I would tell you. But I don't want to get into specifics unless you have questions, and I'll try to answer questions as best I can. But what I do want to do is transition into caregiver tips, because it's so important when you're caring for a loved one. And again, I know and understand that some of your loved ones may live at home. Some of you as parents are taking care of them, or as siblings. Some of them are in group homes or independent living situations. So I recognize that everything I'm saying may not fit to what your situation is, but I think there are some general tips that can help everyone across the board. My number one tip is self-care. Take care of you mentally, whatever that looks like for you, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, even if it's starting every day with a gratitude journal, or if it's just going outside and getting fresh air. Don't be afraid to ask others to come and sit with your loved one if you need to get out for 30 minutes, or depending on if they're not at home. You still have to take care of yourself so that you can be present in the moment and help manage the situation. The other thing I would say is trust your gut and trust that you're doing your best. Don't underestimate now, at this point in your journey, what you've been doing your whole life. I think so many of us are in that role of advocate. We're advocating, we're fighting for our loved ones. We know best what they need, better than anyone knows best. So if you can, don't doubt yourself and don't carry guilt with you, because this isn't the time or space where you need that to overcome your emotions, because it will impact the way you're able to care for them. I did say this in a different way earlier, but denial is easier than acceptance. And acceptance will allow you to meet them where they're at today, let them tell you and show you what they need, and how you can adjust your expectations and have the willingness to pivot. And meeting them where they're at today is so important, because it's not going to be like yesterday. It's not going to be like tomorrow. You can't anticipate what that's going to be like. But it also allows you to be present and enjoy the moment. And if you are at that stage where you have accepted a diagnosis that's terminal, it makes the journey different in that you can focus on the things that bring joy, and focus on the things, you know what, if they want ice cream and that's what they want to eat, we're not really into working on our nutrition anymore. Of course, you're not going to neglect their care and you're not going to neglect their needs, but it makes it easier to say, yep, you know what, let's eat ice cream all day today, because maybe that's all they can do or all they want to do. So, if you can remember that denial is easier than acceptance, but acceptance will allow you to embrace the journey differently. And also try not to get hung up on a timeline. There were so many times where we kept asking the doctor, how long do you think he has? What do you think? How much longer? How long what stage do you think he's in? Where do you think he's at? And looking back, that didn't matter, because so many things overlapped. Sometimes he was like, oh, well, he's in early stage, but at the same time, he's in late stage, or he's in mid stage, but he's still here. And a lot of that doesn't even apply to our loved ones with Down syndrome, because it's not the typical progression like it is in the typical population. So I would say try not to get hung up on a timeline. Enjoy the good parts of each day. Not every day is going to be a good day, but you can find a good part of every day. And if you want, write it down, keep a journal, look at it at the end of the day or the end of the month, because you might feel like you have a week of all bad days. But if you look back and say, oh, on Friday, he gave me the most beautiful smile, or he said, "Hi, Chris," when I walked in, and he remembered my name, even though I thought he didn't remember who I was anymore. He said, "Hi, Chris." So try to focus on the good parts of each day. That will allow you to be present in the moment while you're also grieving. And something my dad would say every time someone came in, my advice here is to simplify. When people would come in, we all know a lot of things you shouldn't do. Hi, Matt. Do you remember me? Do you remember who I am? Do you remember this? I mean, we shouldn't do that with anybody with Alzheimer's. But my dad would tell people, if you want to talk to Matt, just sit down. A sentence is better than a paragraph. A word is better than a sentence. And a touch is better than a word. Hug him, touch him, sit with him, be with him. Just simplify the environment a little bit. Don't underestimate the power of touch if they can tolerate it and that doesn't give them anxiety. Um, because you're going to miss the hugs and you're going to miss those times of holding their hand. And simplifying just life for you and for them really can make things a lot easier. And lastly, I mean, this, you could put this in any order where you want, but something that when I was saying earlier about, know that you're doing the best you can. If you can tell yourself every day and ask yourself, are they safe? Are they clean? Are they comfortable? Are they safe? Are they clean? Are they comfortable? You're giving them what they need. They know they are loved. They know and can feel the love that you have for them. Um, those were things that some of those things we did during this journey, some of those things we learned from and wished we had done. And they really helped our family. We tried to do self-care a lot. My mom and dad, we've got I've got my parents are in their late 70s, and that becomes a challenge trying to take care of an adult child, so to speak. In this stage, or if you're adult siblings and your parents have passed and you're trying to manage your own families and your own health care issues, it's just important to focus on the things you can do to care for yourself so that you can best care for your loved one. And there is no right or wrong way to do this. There's no judgment. If you have to place your loved one in a facility or in a nursing home or in a memory care facility because you can't physically do the work, that is just as okay as being able to care for them in the home. And resources are limited, help is hard to find. There's a whole slew of things that will make each of your situations different, and there is no right or wrong way to do it, because you're going to do what you know is best for your loved one and give them the care that they can or that they need. There are a couple of resources that I constantly followed when we were in this journey. There is a social media. I mean, but she has books and websites. Her name is Hospice Nurse Julie McFadden, and we can probably put these in the notes. And then also end of life and hospice nurse Barbara Carnes, Karnes. Both of them have excellent material. They have books that you can read. They have great resources online. I learned so much from both of these nurses during the journey that really helped me help educate my parents. One more thing that just something made me think of it. Um, Something again, these are not easy things to hear, but things that we did because we knew we had the gift of time. The more planning we did around knowing that Matthew was going to die, knowing that we'd have to be preparing to plan a funeral and services, the more we did earlier on, the better that made it for us and the more helpful that was for us. There were many conversations where I had to gently and lightly approach my parents and say, what do you think about the idea of planning Matthew's funeral? And sometimes it was like, nope, we don't want to talk about it today, or yeah, we probably should do that, but we don't want to right now. And then we did get to a point where they were ready to do that. And Matthew was still doing pretty well at that point, considering, and we probably planned it at least a year before he passed away. But getting down to, for us, we're a Catholic family. The Mass was a very important part of this. So we really wanted to make it special. We wanted to make it reflective of Matthew's life, really picking out what songs we wanted, the way we wanted it to flow, the readings we wanted, the people we wanted involved. My mom had even, I didn't know this until later on. I mean, she had even like put aside what she wanted him to wear at some point and just, kept that in the closet. Those things were very difficult, and I cannot even pretend to know what that's like from my parents' perspective, because I know how hard it was for me as a sibling. But my parents said when Matthew was pretty much in his final weeks, they said to me, I'm so glad that we did that, because there's no way we would have been able to even think about that now. And you don't want to be focusing on that when the death comes and when the time comes. You don't want to be focusing on being wrapped up in, having to go through you're just going through the motions of planning a funeral at that point, and maybe it won't be as meaningful. But again, that's something that our family did and we chose to do, and it worked for us. It may or may not be relevant to you. And I don't want to keep going to the death part of it, but that's where our story ends, and that's the reality of it. So I hope that I was able to share things with you that resonated, that maybe you could take with you, or that you want to know more about and connect with me on. And I thank you for your time and for your attentiveness. And I'd love to open it up to questions or
Oh,
feedback.
Kristen, before we do the questions and before I even ask you this next part, thank you so much for everything that you shared. Your authenticity, honesty, and your love for your brother just carried the entire discussion, and I appreciate you so much for all of that. The only question that I had, you covered that we talked about actually, but some of the beginning state, and I'm taking you now the opposite direction, but we talked about how people with Down syndrome show their beginning signs differently than the typical population. So that the typical population you may notice because they're forgetting things, or they're forgetting words, or they're putting the chicken into, the cupboard, or the clothes, in some other place that are wet and should be in the dryer. But our folks, they show different signs. And you talked a little bit to me about how Matthew, some of his like OCDs were
Yeah,
no longer OCD. So I wondered if you could talk about that for a minute, about like what you noticed first that was a change in behavior, but not an outward, extrinsically observable behavior, but the just subtle differences.
sure. So some of the things we noticed, and I would say because Matthew was always very much a part of the community. I mean, he went from high school and he worked independently in the community for a long time. And then the sad part was we kind of went backwards on the continuum. You work your whole life to get them independent. And then we went from him working in the community to more of I don't even know what they call them now, a workshop program, then to a daycare program. And he went backwards on the continuum until he could no longer participate in that. So one of the first things that we noticed, and actually he had a great boss and a great job coach. He was working at a retirement community, and he had trouble with performing his daily tasks. He was a perfectionist at what he did. And for years he was working at this place. He was vacuuming, he was wiping tables. He had, a lot of tasks along those lines. And the first thing that we got called about was his boss said, he's standing in the same place every day and he just keeps vacuuming the same spot. And it doesn't seem like he knows that he's supposed to move around the room anymore to vacuum the whole room. Or he always wipes these tables, but he only wiped 5 out of the 10 tables today. And then a couple months later, it would be he's only wiping one table now, and he's only wiping one area of the table. He's not remembering to clean the entire surface of the table. So those were things that they noticed in his job. At home, Matthew was always very particular about everything had an order, and he was very OCD, and he had a wall full of, snow globe shakers, and everything had a place on his dresser. And my mom would notice, she said, I went into Matt's room today and stuff was all moved all over his dresser and he didn't seem to be bothered by it, or he didn't put his clothes where he normally does. Occasionally she would find his shoes under the bathroom sink. I mean, those are more, in line with typical population, but he was doing some things like that. And then it started to become during the night, the sleeping patterns were changing. And as I mentioned before, the dressing, he would change his shirt 50 times throughout the night, not 50, but come down, not dressed we were noticing he's not remembering all the steps of these daily living skills that he always was good at, which again is why it's important to know their baseline, because these things were out of character for Matthew, and those kind of cued us into, we better take a look at these and what's happening.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So if you have any interest in asking a follow-up question of Kristin, please feel free to unmute yourself. Maybe because there's so many of you, you could signal in some way that you have a question, and then Kristin can answer them.
If anybody is, I can't see if people are.
Yeah, let me unspotlight you and
their hand or anything, or you can just come out and ask. And again, if anybody wants to talk offline or after the fact, I'm more than happy to do that. I think I'm going to put my email and phone number in the chat. And I just put my email, and then I'll put my phone number. And then if I know this was a lot to digest, and I understand that there's a lot to take in here and a lot of emotions. So I don't have any expectation that we have a big, long conversation. And, if people are not at that point now, Debbie, if you want to show the video, we can, or.
Well, I thought maybe we would share your podcast a little for a second, if you want to talk about it, and then I'll share the screen so that people can see what it looks like online.
If I met 2 wonderful women on a Facebook group that actually, Deirdre, you are on here tonight. Deirdre had introduced me, Deirdre Roselli, to this Facebook group, and it was a support group for people caring for a loved one with Down syndrome and Alzheimer's. And I met 2 wonderful women, and we just connected. One lost her aunt. She was caregiver for her aunt, Molly. And then Jadine, who started the Facebook group, is right now in the midst of caring for her son, Matt, who is almost 52 and probably, going into the later stages of the journey. So we connected, and our story is on the very first episode, so I won't ruin it all for you, but if you choose to go listen to it, we connected. We each had an idea at some point about doing a podcast because we wanted to be able to share information, get information out there from professionals in the field, share our stories and things that we learned through the journey. And it's called Aging with Down Syndrome. You can find it on any platform that you listen to it, or that you listen to podcasts. If you want to scroll up, Debbie, you can see the logo, just so you know when to look for it if you want to look for it. You can also go to agingwithdownsyndrome.com, the website, and there it is right there. Yeah. So there's right now, we've only got, I think 4 or 5 episodes out. It's brand new. We just launched it. We're going to drop a new episode every 2 weeks. It's going to be a mixture of professionals in the field, and we're going to have a lot of guest speakers on there, whether it's family members or grief counselor, or if there's topics that you want to hear about that we can talk about and discuss or bring guests on, we're more than willing to do that. This is our new baby, so we're still in the learning process of it, but we've gotten some really good feedback from it so far. And the issue, or the episode that I was referring to that is really good, is that second one, Common Health Issues Over 40, with Dr. Brian Chicoine. He is so excellent. He's got a wealth of knowledge. He's been doing this for years. He's seen over 7,000 patients with Down syndrome and adults with Down syndrome. So he's very, very good at what he does. That one I would recommend going to listen to that, after the intro one, if you want to hear our story. And we would love it if you would subscribe. And really all we want to do is make this a channel to share information. So feel free to share it with anybody. If some episodes will resonate with you, some you will have zero interest in, or they won't be relatable to you. But as we get more, you can kind of pick and choose which ones you might enjoy or might be helpful to you. So thank you, Debbie, for letting me share that.
This tool for screening for dementia, is that the MTG that you're talking about?
Yes, that was the EDSD that I mentioned earlier. Yep.
Yeah. Good. All right. Well, if nobody has any questions, we will start the Matthew Scheid video. Everybody can see my screen, correct?
Debbie, it's Mary Beth. Kristin, I just wanted to thank you. I've heard a lot of professionals and doctors and social workers, but I can't recall a session with someone who just brought such not only compassion, but information along with the compassion. And although I'm not prepared for what's going forward with our sister, my sibs are on here too, but I just feel like what you've done has given me some support and strength that when it comes, I feel like you have your little hand on my shoulder there, guiding me along. So I just want to thank you. And, I'm already on the podcast, and more information, the better. I think it was hard for us to hear, and also so hard for you to share, but so meaningful. So I just wanted to thank you.
Thanks, Mary Beth.
And in your podcast going forward, just one, not to go through it tonight, but we face a lot of anxiety. Casey has a lot of anxiety, and any tips that you can provide to how to reassure her, and anything that you've learned in your journey about addressing anxiety. It's physical, we see it, as well as emotional. So thank you again, Kristin.
Thank you.
That's a great suggestion, Mary Beth. Anybody else?
I'd like to thank you too. I really appreciate this. Our son hasn't shown any signs yet, but about 3 months ago, he said to me 2 or 3 times over the course of a week, just like with his head in his hand, saying, "I just can't remember." And then that seemed to pass off, and he wasn't saying it anymore. But when you say baseline, are you saying you want us to register the behaviors, his normal behaviors, or is there some kind of a scan that is a baseline scan?
You can't both. You can do either. I mean, some families we never chose to do any scans with Matthew, but we did know our baseline of behaviors and what he was capable of and different things, and we kept note. But some families do opt to do a scan when they go through the whole testing process, and they can compare. I mean, I don't, again, if he needs to be put under for scans, I wouldn't recommend doing that multiple times.
Oh,
If you pretty much have a diagnosis and you clinically have ruled out other things, for us, we didn't need to know by a scan. It wasn't going to help us, but other families choose to. And again, you're just going to see more of the plaques in the brain. It's not you can't say, oh, he has Alzheimer's based on the scan.
right. Thank you, Chris.
Annie, did you want to say anything? Annie Regan?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. My phone was ready to die, so I had to go to my phone. My iPad was dying. Thank you so much. It was really, really, really good. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, I'm so glad that all of you came. And again, I'm going to start the video, but if you have any follow-up questions, you have all of Kristin's information, or you can send them to me and I will pass them along. But either way, we don't want anyone to walk away with any unanswered questions or thoughts. So,
Well, I don't know how to get the chat, so I didn't get her phone number. Could somebody just read it to me so I could write it down?
Yeah, I can just give it to you. It's 216-533-9664. And you can text me or call me. I know I've got Kim on here saying you might reach out. But like I said, please, anybody feel free to reach out at any time.
Okay, it's 216-533-9664.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
okay, did you see the rest of the chat, Kristin?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay, I think you just have to bring the arrow back to the beginning there.
Can't be described, and it's
I'm
one of those
checking.
things that
Gotta
Yeah,
get rid
just
of this.
drag it back to the beginning. And I do this just because I had this video made before Matthew died, because I wanted something that we would always have. And this, I show it and I share it with a lot of people.
and that's most enduring.
Sorry. Yeah, we can just, yeah. Go ahead, you can play it.
Okay, and also you had mentioned to me that all your caregivers saw this, right? So they got to get a sense of Matthew, who he was before the disease
Yeah,
ravaged.
my dad would show letters that he had written to doctors in the hospital to give him a sense of who he was. And yeah, and there's some other things I could probably share about that later too, but I don't want to keep anybody too long.
Okay, here we go.
Quality is undying love for all of us. I mean,
These are all aunts and uncles, by the way, in this video, and my family. And for some reason, the music isn't playing, but you'll be able to hear everyone talking.
when I spend time with Matthew, I walk away happy. I walk away with a smile on my face, and usually a hug.
It just really reminds us how important it is to have these times, to have these moments, and to appreciate every time and moment, because Matt did.
Family is everything, and he reminded you of that on a regular basis. He shows you what's important.
Matt loved family gatherings. I mean, that was like his favorite thing. Any type of reunion, like it was just something he would think about all the time, and constantly talk to people about, like, oh, this many days till this, and he would do like a countdown. And he just reminds us how important this is and how great this family is. The purity of his heart. He's just such a genuine person. To know Matt is to know God, and that's what reminds me of, just a child of God. Matt always shows love for everybody unconditionally. He's always the last person to ever make any judgment. He's the sweetest, kindest, most generous person I've ever known in my life. Just a blessing that I'm lucky to have, that many people don't know that kind of love in their lives.
The most welcoming, genuine, loving person you could ever be around.
Nothing really quite matches the feeling of just being with Uncle Matt and spending time with him.
It's one of those things that can't be described, and it's one of those things that just can't ever be replicated by anyone else.
Just the way he says, I love you, really brightens your day and makes you just feel warm. A special memory I have of me and Uncle Matt would be, we were having a family party and we're sitting at the counter together. He's writing on his board and I was doing homework. I looked at him and I said, do you know who I am? And he just gave me the biggest smile and said, my best friend.
I'll never forget the time Matt and I were able to celebrate my wedding, and I got to see him give the best man speech. He brought up the microphone, knocked it out of the ballpark, and had everyone in tears in the entire wedding.
Sorry, you can't hear him talking.
Forget that moment, because we share that moment as brothers, and that was really, really special.
Well, one of the stories that I have with Matt is I was a musician in my, 20s, and he would come and visit us in Arizona. One time, my cousin and I we were goofing around on a tape, and we created a Matthew rap.
A family having blast.
And he loved that tape. I heard from his parents that he played it endlessly.
The poor dude. Or Matt.
Matt has shown me life through a different lens. He's inspired me to make a difference in helping people treat people like they deserve to be treated. Matt and I had this brother-sister disability awareness team, and we went around from the time I was 13 and he was 18, talking about disability awareness to kids and students, and it developed into a 20-year program to students and teachers and administrators and tens of thousands of kids, and that was our thing. Matt and I had this brother-sister team. So he's inspired me to make a difference and help people just be kind to one another.
Oh, I'll never time Matt and I had our driving lesson. He visited in Arizona. He was staying with me a little bit. And I was, 16, 18, something like that. I said, Matt, do you have a driver's license? No, I don't. I said, hey, let's go and practice driving. So I took him to the parking lot by church, and we drove around the parking lot. Thank God it was not Sunday, just it's an empty parking lot. But he drove up and down the aisles, turned left, turned right, stop, put your blinker on, pull in a parking place. It was the best time of all.
Matthew is the center or the focal point of our family. And whenever we come together and he's there, we just gravitate towards Matthew Scheid. He just unites us.
It was just his style of living that pulled everybody in.
And keeps us bonded to each other. The glue of the family. If people knew Matt was going to be at an event or a family gathering or a family picnic or family reunion, then people made the effort to be there.
Uncle Matt, he loves Mitchell's. He'll always offer to take you there and pay for it. But once you get there, he then realizes he forgot his wallet.
He always forgot his wallet. So he liked to preserve his money by not bringing it with him.
Would sort of always do the grab on the pants and then say, oh, I left the wallet at home, so you're going to have to pay. And it's like, this is like the fifth time you've left your wallet at home. But okay, that's okay. That was his thing. Sometimes he would leave it at home. And I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but I don't care. It was fun. It was fun to pay the bill, and he got to save some more. So, hey, we're all better off, right?
Birthdays are a holiday for Matt.
Matt loved to celebrate people, and birthdays was a good opportunity to celebrate people. He genuinely loves everyone. You get a phone call from Matt on your birthday, and he'd call to wish you a happy birthday. And again, that was an opportunity for him to celebrate people that he cared about, and that's something that I think we all appreciated. We cherish the relationship that we have with Matt.
He loves his birthday. This is the guy who is unabashed about how important his birthday is. And that's a good reminder to all of us, maybe about a happiness, about being alive and being in a family.
He's a very positive person. He's always very positive and encouraging. And it just inspires you. It really inspires, me to be that kind of person at all times.
He cares about you, he cares about everybody.
He just absolutely loved everybody. I can't think of a moment where Matt greeted somebody and he didn't arm around him.
Well, aren't we lucky that we have him? We're lucky we have him.
He's made a profound impact on anyone's life that he's met, and he certainly changed all of our lives, and all for the better.
Having Uncle Matt as my uncle has been just the greatest blessing that I could have asked for.
I'm just super happy to have Uncle Matt in my life. Definitely shaped me into the person that I am today. Without him, I don't know where I would stand as an individual. Words can't describe how much I love him and how much he loves his family.
The greatest measure of goodness I can think of, dear Mr. Matthew Scheidt.
He spread that joy every time you're with him. I'm glad I've had the chance to have him in my life.
Having Matt as my brother, it's given me the truest love I've ever known. And I know I am the person I am because of Matt in my life.
To love and be loved is the greatest gift in the world.
Yeah, is it ready?
And Matt was that gift. And he lived it. And in Hebrew, Matthew means gift from God. So even if we didn't know that about the name, we learned it from the boy and the man.
Well, Kristin, thank you for giving us Matt. I mean, what a privilege it is to watch that video and get to know who he was. Sorry we didn't know him at the time, but we appreciate you sharing him with us tremendously. And I think you got a lot of comments and a lot of thank yous in the chat. So I hope you take the time to read those too.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody for your patience and spending a couple of hours with us tonight. And I welcome honest feedback. This speaking engagement is a new one for me. I mean, in terms of what we used to do. So anything that you have that would help make it different or improve it going forward, I won't be offended by any constructive criticism. Thanks for letting me share my story tonight.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you, Kristin.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Just reading some of the comments here, Debbie.
Okay, then I won't turn it off.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Make it bigger so you can see them all. Oh, you can't see. You'll see them. You're seeing them on your screen.
I think so. Okay. What? Okay, yeah, I was going to say if those are. All right.
Did you see what Neil wrote down?
Yes, I just saw that. Another meeting. Okay. him. I wanted to make sure I wrote